Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so I want to get started. I will probably get distracted if somebody comes in and I have to let them in. But since there's only a few people on live, feel free to ask questions. Um, Basically, what I wanted to do here was kind of talk about what homeschool looks like versus what you did in the spring, because I know, not Jennifer, but I know most people watching this were just kind of thrown in to homeschooling. Turn my light on. Thrown into homeschooling. That was not your plan at all. So I kind of call it crisis schooling or even isolation schooling. Most homeschoolers would say that what you had to do was not actually homeschooling, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So a few things as we get started are, I will try to keep this to 30 minutes. I hope to have time for questions about your situations. But I'm not debating responses and attitudes about COVID. I know people are considering homeschooling coming from very different angles when it comes to what's going on, but we're not going to talk about that. If I suggest something that goes against your beliefs about it, then you can just ignore it. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. Also know that every family, even just in regular homeschooling, every family is different. Every family homeschools for a different reason, and how they homeschool looks so different from the next family. I do believe, when I'm coming at this, I do believe that if you are homeschooling, it won't work well if you resent this choice. So if you really reluctantly decide to homeschool and you really resent that you're doing it, it's not going to work well for you. And I would say that, for many, many parenting decisions, but especially with this, I'm also coming from the belief that you can do this, that it is definitely possible to do it. I also believe that you can change your mind. So I have no idea, how your public school system works already when it comes to homeschoolers moving in and out of your system. But most likely you can change your mind. You can come to homeschooling if you start in August and it's just a hot mess. You can decide to homeschool then. Or if you start homeschooling and it's a hot mess in your own home, you can decide to return to your previous situation. I also am kind of assuming a typically developing kid when I talk about any scenarios. Special needs kids have special needs, okay? So that obviously goes back to the every family situation is different. Definitely, if you do have a special needs kid, consider, call whatever offices, whatever departments you've worked with before in your district to see how you can work with that if you decide to pull your kid from your current school situation. For younger kids, I'm very much a relaxed homeschooler. I really believe you don't need a curriculum for your kindergartner. That playing, exploring, reading, and reading some more is great for kids from those really young ages. There's almost nothing they can't pick up later, is what I feel with those young ages. And you can disagree with me there, but again, I'm just trying to let you know where I'm coming from. So let's talk about your options. We're talking about a lot of different options here. So you have your current school situation going all online. Then most places are also talking about a hybrid, so online plus in-person classroom instruction. And then you have the other public school options that are all online. So in New Mexico, sounds like they're telling you that you can do E-Academy. There's also Connections Academy, things that are like public schools but online. Then you can also homeschool with online programs. So there's tons of programs, and I really can't, there's so many curricula out there that I can't really get into specifics about them, but there are lots of online programs. Some you can have a teacher or some kind of learning partner, some it's you completely with the online help and self-paced, lots of options there. You can also homeschool with a boxed curriculum, which is here we send you all the books and all the instruction material. And this is a little bit more like what us homeschoolers call school at home, okay? So I'm talking about homeschooling, and homeschoolers will say, oh, well, they kind of do school at home, which is mean they try to duplicate a school situation in their house. And so that's probably what a lot of people that don't homeschool think of when they think of homeschooling. So they might think, well, we've got everybody at the table, we've got everybody in desks, and now we're doing math, so everybody take out your math book. Probably most homeschool, I know a few homeschoolers that do that, but most homeschoolers probably do not do that. And then the final option is probably homeschooling your way, whatever your way is. And we can talk a little bit about that as we go too. So the first step is you have to find out what the laws of your state are. And I will send this information out or post it in the replay. But there's the Homeschool Legal Defense has a site, and they tell you what the rules are in every state for homeschooling, and that's hslda.org/legal. And again, I'll send that out to you later. But for instance, in New Mexico, it's pretty easy. You need to, you are the parent, and you might have a, you don't have to be the one that's homeschooling, but you have to have, I forget what they call it, a teaching agent, or can't remember what they call it, but somebody else can teach your child. And I think that person has to have at least, oh gosh, see, go to the website. I can't remember what everything is. You need to keep attendance. You need to keep immunization records. And it's pretty relaxed. You go to the East Coast, like, Pennsylvania, you're talking about standardized tests. You might be meeting with a teacher to look at a portfolio of work. Might be much more regimented. In California, some people seem to set up like private schools or private school entities or entities with tutors to homeschool there. So you really need to look at what the rules are in your state, because that will determine, for some of you, that's going to eliminate a lot of your options. For some of you, you might find comfort in seeing, okay, here's what I have to do, or here are the standards that I have to meet. So definitely start there. Okay, so talking about how homeschooling is different than what you did last spring. Basically, you were thrown into that. Everybody was learning as they went. Everybody. Your kids were, you were, their teachers were. But there will still be some things that are the same. If you decide to do the school you did last year, so that could be public school, that could be private school, I know. So some things that were the same is that you'll be at home, or maybe the setting of your choice. It might be somebody else's home, but probably at home. You'll be following what the teacher or the school system prescribes. You'll probably then be working within, at least this year, stricter guidelines and grading. Okay, so now everybody's had a chance to figure stuff out. I'm gonna let someone in. They figured some things out. They know what their system is, and it sounds like this year there will also possibly be grading. So I know last year there was sort of a no-fail policy for some places. You will be accountable, sort of, in other words. So, you got to show up for the classes. You'll probably have to be checking in to make sure your kid's getting stuff done. And for a lot of you, you'll be managing live classes, possibly between multiple kids. So for some of you, that means considering, do I have multiple devices? Do I have enough internet bandwidth so that we can have multiple classes? Are you also trying to work online at the same time? And so what I felt bad for was the parents that have, 3 kids plus, and those teachers can't check in with each other. Oh, you have this sibling in, or you scheduled that, at the same time as my class. You're really trying to juggle a lot of different schedules, get people online. Now, of course, if your kids are older, maybe they're a little more independent, but if you have young kids that need to be online for that, then you are managing and overseeing that. So for some people, that was the stressful part. And that's where homeschooling might be appealing, is that you don't have to deal with that. So that's some ways that they're the same. Homeschooling, yes, you're also at home like you were last spring, but homeschooling can be a lot more flexible. So what we were just talking about with trying to manage all the different classes. I know when I sent out my email, a lot of people had concerns about the amount of screen time their kids were getting because of all that, those Zoom classes, or video. A lot of places were like, okay, for today's lesson, watch this video on this, and then we'll get on Zoom and talk about it. So it was a lot of screen time. So with homeschooling, you can manage that. You can be a little more flexible because you don't have to be at home on the computer at this exact time for your kids' Zoom session. With homeschooling, you can also choose another curriculum or program. And, you know, you might have similar guidelines to what your state is doing, or it could be a lot more flexible. With the online public schools like Connections Academy, and that's the only one I can really speak about because I've heard a lot of people talk about their experience. I have not heard anybody really talk about eAcademy. You sometimes have to be online, like a Zoom class. While it is often touted as being very flexible, the people that I've heard say it is not really very flexible, or it wasn't for them. So you'd really just want to consider, that would be one thing you need to ask, is how many live classes do we have to be at? Because you might be counted absent. I'm not really sure how all of that works. But really look into the flexibility. It might be pretty similar to what you're already having to do for the school that they're already at. So definitely consider that. With homeschooling, you can capitalize on your kids' interests. And that does not mean you have to come up with this amazing curriculum with crafts and field trips, which will probably be limited anyway. You don't have to do all of that. It can be simple. But if your kid is interested in dinosaurs or bugs or fashion or royalty, you can watch some YouTube videos or movies that you remember liking, read books, give reports, sticker books, even, Lego themed things around that. You really can cater it to what they like without having to put so much stress on yourself to come up with something amazing. Now, there are a lot of materials out there that if your kid does have an interest, I bet you can find something that is not too expensive, that you could put together for him or her. And then I'm going to do another talk next week, a little bit more on lessons and curriculum. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that homeschooling, you do have a lot of flexibility in what you can do. Now, if you are in a state where you have to do standardized tests or, meet some state requirements, you might have less of that, but you can get creative and still try to work those interests into whatever they have to do. But, maybe this year, every third grader has to learn about photosynthesis. Okay, well, learn about photosynthesis. See if you can talk about what animals they like, eating those plants, or anything else that might appeal to them. But when I said earlier that I'm pretty relaxed as a homeschooler, especially for those younger grades, your third grader will have no problem learning about photosynthesis in fifth grade or sixth grade or any other grade. So it's not like if they miss that, they are missing something, vital to the rest of their education. And maybe I should say that I do have a daughter that is going to college this year. So she did miss stuff. I don't remember when we did photosynthesis or if we did it or if we did it when we were supposed to do it. Granted, she's not a science girl. But things like that, when they're interested especially, they will get those subjects. Okay, so some similarities now between homeschooling and what you were doing before. Again, you're going to be at home and you're going to be isolated more than most homeschoolers. So when we started homeschooling, my husband said, I don't know why they call it homeschool. You're never home. So most homeschoolers are out and about. I will talk about the socialization issue in another talk. So it was different for homeschoolers this year too. So many of us participate in co-ops. We are very active. We go out a lot. So for us, the pandemic was also a challenge because now we're home and we're not seeing our friends. In fact, I would argue that homeschoolers saw their friends more and throughout several years. So, in school, great, you have that best friend in second grade and then suddenly you're in different classes in third grade. Homeschoolers tend to really keep those relationships a long time. And then to suddenly not be able to see your friends was challenging for homeschoolers as well. You are still going to have to oversee a lot of the work. So if your child was assigned, you you have to be at this class and do this homework by their teacher from their school last year. If you had to oversee that last year, if they weren't fairly independent yet, you're probably going to have to oversee that, this year, and except you'll be the one assigning things. You could also look at a tutor or co-op option. I'm going to talk about this next Tuesday or Wednesday. I can't remember when that is. So you can take what you're doing, and this could be whether it is the prescribed curriculum of your school that you are continuing to go to again this year, or lessons that you develop yourself or bring together from different people. And you could divide up that work between different parents or a tutor of some kind. And homeschoolers, this is something I take advantage of because, science is not my strong suit to teach. Reading, writing, literature is. And so the science mom is like, great, you teach that and I'll teach this to your kid. So we do that a lot. And we can get creative with that if you think that might help you manage better. This might be something to consider if you're working. Maybe you have higher kids in higher grades and you're just not that strong in a subject that you're worried about. And it also might be something to consider if you have younger kids for whom you feel like the socialization is still really important. So if you wanted to expand that bubble and meet with some people regularly, that might be something for you to consider as well. Let's see, but some of the differences. When you homeschool, you can do it on your own schedule. So we talked about that, and that might include your work schedule. If you have young kids, I'm sure working is something you're worried about. I really feel this is one of the places where my opinion is going to come in, that if you're working full-time at home or outside of the home and your kids are home, you're probably going to have to expand your bubble a little bit, because if you have, a 5 and a 7-year-old, leaving them to completely be independent while you're doing your work is not realistic. If you have a high schooler, okay, maybe that's a little more realistic. I would even say if you have a middle schooler, it might really depend on the kid. I actually have concerns about middle schoolers being left at home all day long by themselves, on the internet. That's something that isn't going to work for some families. But you can set your own schedule. And on Saturday, we'll have a mom who's been a single working mom in homeschooling. And I know other families who change the schedule around. They don't live kind of that traditional schedule that a lot of people do, so that they can work and still homeschool. So they might not, everybody's situation is different, but they might do most of their homeschooling in late afternoon, or, oops, going to let somebody in. Or maybe they do stuff in the evenings, or maybe mom and dad sort of have rotating shifts, and they're able to tag team a little bit with the homeschooling. So we'll talk about that more over the weekend. You'll have more flexibility if you homeschool, both in time and the curriculum. So we talked about that. You can have some more choices if you decide to pull out of your previous school situation. You'll have more say in the subjects that you're able to teach and work in. And then testing might be a difference too. So again, depending on your state, you might have testing requirements, or I have no idea what they're going to be doing about standardized testing in APS or any of the public school systems next year. But I know in my state, if you homeschool, there is no standardized tests that you have to do. So that is whatever it is to you. For me, I like that. For other people, maybe they don't like that so much. So now we're going to get into my opinion. Here's what I would do if I were you, I guess is what this portion is called. For young kids, and I'm thinking 4th grade and under, and of course your kids are all different. If you decide to homeschool, I don't want to offend any teachers, but I would say academics do not need to be super structured in those younger years. Again, they can pick up anything they missed later. They can learn about photosynthesis later if that was what they were supposed to learn this year in school, if you don't get to it. They're just wired to learn, those young kids. So they can easily get these things in future years. I would really focus on real books, literature, and math. I would say go ahead and find some kind of math curriculum to keep you on track. That's where those state standards also might be helpful. If you get really solid books, good books, they'll get their other subjects that way. And you might want to include some writing too. As your kids get older, a lot of times parents sort of lose their confidence in their ability to teach their kids some subjects. And that will, your older kids will have very different personalities, motivation. Some of them are going to just get down to it and get to work, and some of them will do everything possible not to do it. Well, I have a separate talk on that coming up as well. I would suggest that you give them a say in their curriculum if you do decide to homeschool. There's lots of options out there. So maybe talk to them about what they want to do. Maybe they want to do living books and do a lot of reading if they're big readers. Maybe they really want to focus on robotics, and you can work in a lot of their subjects that way. And then also possibly give them a say in scheduling. Maybe they're used to sleeping in a little later now, so you don't necessarily have to start at the same time your school started. Obviously, that's a family decision because there's the family schedules, but sometimes if older kids have a say in how that day is structured or what comes next, they're a little more cooperative. Another thing to consider is, should you homeschool maybe one of the kids but not another, or some combination? I would really recommend, if you have younger kids, you could, and you're concerned about teaching those higher level subjects, you could probably, well, again, it really depends on the kid, but if you kind of take my more relaxed approach to the younger years, it might be easier to homeschool the younger kids while the older kids are getting on Zooms. And so you're not having to manage every kid in your family. That's something to consider when it comes to all these options that you have for next year. Again, remember that no decision is permanent. Most likely, you can change your mind. I said this at the beginning. If you start school and you feel like it's a hot mess, you can start homeschooling. And if you start homeschooling and you feel like you just are losing it, you can return to school. Most likely. I have no idea what those rules are going to look like for everybody, but that's how it's always been, at least here in New Mexico. Think about what you've always wanted to do with your kids. Is there something you've always really wanted to have fun with or learn about? Maybe this is the year to do it. I'm a big fan of life skills. So if you feel like your kids, are always too busy with schoolwork to help out in the kitchen or help out with chores, maybe this is the year you could focus on that and really help them contribute to the family. Have you always wanted to maybe do some sort of gratitude practice or prayer with your family? Maybe this is the year to add that. Maybe, some sort of family project like memory books or, gardening, things like that are really great to consider for this year. So that is most of what I had. Jennifer is on, and she's a longtime homeschooler too. So if there's anything you totally agree with or totally disagree with, go ahead and say. And then if any of the rest of you have questions, you're welcome to ask too. Go ahead, Jennifer, we'll start with you.
I think you did a really good job, Amy Lee. I mean, I really agree with you about taking it easy for the early elementary years. I think a lot of the parents that I mingle with, because I have a large family. I have the span of, I have an 18-year-old and I have a 3-year-old. So I have the early elementary age, and I've already seen the big kids through all the school years. And it's really hard for parents who are going through elementary age kids for the first time to just relax and let it go a little bit. But I totally agree that just taking it easy, reading books to them, like the parents reading to the kids is really important for every year, all the way through, I think, like 6th grade and maybe even 8th grade. Just reading challenging books and doing some math. And, we really like to study history So for my early elementary kids, we're just doing a little math curriculum that we do twice a week, and we're reading a lot of history, and we just work our way through the ancient civilizations and find extra books to read and coloring pages, and we do crafts that are related to the history, you know, to the ancient theme. And it's great. It's really fun. And we just do it a couple times a week, and it's not a big deal. And you know what? They really flourish. I mean, they learn so much more just with that one-on-one than they do in a big classroom. So
Yeah.
even though we're not doing much, they're getting a lot more focused in what they are doing, and then they have a much better foundation.
Right.
So.
And you're also addressing those things to them at the level you know they're at, so that they will be able to take in that information as fully as they can, because you're so familiar with your kid. And I think we both can remember, you know, the new families that would come to Park Day and, you know, with their preschooler and talk about this, you know, full curriculum that they bought. And was that you? That's okay. And then we just kind of go, okay, that sounds great. Go for it. Talk to us in 3 years. But I know the people on the call have actually, because I know you guys, you have older kids. I don't know all of you, but so if you guys have questions about your particular situations, especially with older kids, now's the time to ask. And you can unmute yourself and ask. Or show yourself. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. What's your question?
I wanted to ask a couple of things. First of all, thank you for doing this. It's such good information right now for
Good,
me personally. I've been in the regular school system. So considering doing online and home learning and stuff. So this is just all really good information. Specific question I have is around, I like the relaxed approach, and I'm considering this for my going into third grade, so third grader. And so the question I have is like, how do you know when enough is enough? Like I heard your colleagues say, you know, math 2 times a week, that sounds awesome. Like, is it just very kind of individual child based in terms of when you decide like, okay, we read for 2 hours today, like that's enough. And then if you're working from home, what do they do for the rest of the time?
So I would say that expect to spend a lot less time doing school at whatever age and stage you are, whoever's watching this. I think it does depend on the kid, because I never had a plan like my kids are going to go to school at this age. They all did tend to go to school for high school, and that's what it's looking like for my youngest. I just had this philosophy of just keep moving forward, keep making progress. So I know homeschoolers who like planned their whole year and they were going to be reading this book and this chapter by this week. That was never me. So even though I'm a productive mama and I talk about organization, that was way too stressful, especially when you're doing it with multiple kids. So it's just like keep moving forward. Now, if you know, and so then for our situation, I had a kid that decided she wanted to go to academy, which I know several of you are familiar with. And then I went, oh my gosh, where are you in math? I don't even know what grade level you're at. And we're going to have to take this, entrance exam and all of that. So if you do have a goal, or if you do know, well, next year she's supposed to take algebra 2, then you might have to kind of set yourself a plan and say, okay, every day we need to do this much of this. And if you do decide to get a curriculum that might lay it out exactly for you, here you do these lessons. When it comes to the reading and the other subjects, I think your kid will tell you, and none of that is like really dictated by anybody else. If you're gonna read about ancient Egypt, I don't think it matters that much how far you get, as long as your kid's actually getting something out of it. So if your kid is obviously like rolling around on the floor and whining about snacks, then okay, then maybe it's time to stop. As far as what they do the rest of the time when you're working at home, I'll talk a little bit about that next week, but I often used a mother's helper. Again, that's expanding your bubble some. I had, I don't know what to call them, like work dates with other moms where we might get together and we got some work done and our kids played, again, expanding your circle. So this would be a carefully chosen family probably in this situation. I tried to make wise use of screen time. And also it's okay for kids to get bored. So if you have activities, if you have art projects, if you have a playground out back, it's okay for your kids to get bored. And again, that's probably more of a homeschool perspective on things because school kids are constantly entertained or they're busy, right? Even if it's just like, let's all line up and go to the bathroom or move to the gym, it's really structured and somebody else is telling them, this is what you're doing now, this is what you're doing now. So having board time is okay, is one of the things I would say there. Maybe schedule, okay, you're going to have a Zoom with your best friend at this time while mom does this. So actually what I'd say is a lot of the strategies you might have used when they were toddlers and you were trying to get stuff done, you might just kind of adapt to where they are now. I hope that helped. I have a few minutes left if somebody has another question. And it can be you again, Giovanna, if nobody else does. Go ahead, Victor. Or
real quick question. So you talked about your oldest daughter wanting to go to academy. What about the other way around? So you know our daughter really well, but yeah. How do you hear from parents that have kiddos going to high school who've done traditional school all along and then all of a sudden go to homeschool in high school?
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely different approach to life and mindset. So I could see it being really hard. I have had friends who tell me, oh, my kid begs to homeschool. There are a lot of older kids who don't love the social aspect of high school because it's hard for them because maybe they don't fit in. You know, my youngest is looking forward to going to high school. And so we've actually started talking about, I don't know what high school is going to look like. She's not starting till next year.
Right.
But the way the world is, who knows? But it would be a completely different way of doing life. She would probably have to be self-motivated somewhat. Kind of structure her own time. I would say you probably have some, really nice people that live close by that if you wanted to expand your bubble some, might be able to cooperate with that.
Yeah.
So, that could really look a lot of different ways. But I would say that if I was talking to high school families that were thinking about pulling their kid, or even thinking about what the heck is that 1 week off going to look like every other week,
right?
That probably, and I just also believe that young people have to socialize.
Right.
That you might need to expand that bubble and maybe set up some things to make that socialization happen in a way that you feel is safe. And that can include academics, possibly, or not. I don't know if that helps. Does that help at all?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So we have just 4 minutes left. If anybody has another question or comment, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, my daughter is 15, so she's going to be a sophomore in high school this fall. And so I'm going to maybe propose to her that we do homeschool, like take a year off and homeschool. And the ideas I have for her are, she's been at a traditional public high school for freshman year. My ideas for her are, we may do the national mythology exam, we might do the geography bee, and we might find like a math competition and just sign up for these academic competitions. And if you sign up for those academic competitions for the older grades, they send you like the study packet for the competition. And it's basically like a curriculum that your kid studies for. And then they take the exam at the end, and that's the competition part of it. And like for the geography bee, it's face-to-face, like they have a actual competition. So anyway, it makes a little more interesting. It's kind of engaging. Mythology is always interesting, you know, so it's a good way to do writing. You know, they get the grammar, the Latin roots, the writing skills. Anyway, so those are some of my ideas.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea, because you have sort of a, here is what you should prepare, here is what you should know. And so Vic, I know you're familiar with Science Olympiad. A lot of my friends on Homeschool, and as you know, the Homeschool team does really well every year. That is their science, is just, you know, learning about these things and getting ready for that competition to do Science Olympiad. So that's a great idea, Jennifer. Thank you. As a way to sort of keep on track and make sure you're progressing in their knowledge in a somewhat structured, sustainable, and realistic way. Like, they've worked with these kids before. They know that they can do this. So here you go. Here's a lesson plan that they can give you, basically.
Are those things available to kids that are in the traditional schools as well? Because with our daughter not being able to do Science Olympiad, this would be a great alternative. So do you have to be homeschooled in order to do these?
No.
I would say that the things she's talking about are like Science Olympiad. There are homeschool teams, but then there are also the public school teams like your daughter was on.
Okay.
So I'm going to finish up, guys. If you have more questions, it is my intent to take this video and to put it somewhere where people can continue to comment and ask questions that I or anybody else could possibly answer. So if your question did not get answered, please watch for that. You're also welcome to email me or contact me directly, since most of you know how to do that are here live, to ask any questions. But thank you for your good questions and for your great input, Jennifer. I know you guys are probably all, you know, stressing out about what is next year going to look like. So I hope this gave you some options and ideas for you to consider, some alternatives that might be really great for you. You might end up loving it. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks a bunch.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Jennifer.